there's a clear head. There's a clear head, shoulders, arms, torso.
There was something about the way this thing moved where I pictured an older gentleman, just the way that they were moving, its mannerisms. I pictured an older gentleman peering his head around the corner going, what's going on in here? Mm-hmm. Almost as if I was about to get yelled at for being too loud during a sleepover with a friend. That's what this entity, that's what this being felt like to me. I was about to get in trouble by an older man.
I agree. To me, though, there's the frame, like the size and thickness of the frame just felt more of like it was bigger than a child. That's why like Alien comes to mind. To be quite honest.
So the first place
go look at like pictures of what we think aliens look like. That's kind of what this thing looked like to me, with just a human head instead of a gray head.
So the first thing I go to is
weird face.
We're always told that people back in the 1800s were smaller. They were shorter. Mm-hmm. So why a lot of the older fashioned houses are built with substantially shorter door frame. So to me, it's the size of an adult, fully grown adult that I would have seen in the 1800s.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to table our thoughts.
Commercial break.
We're going to take a quick. Well, wait. I have to cut, and we'll come right back. Let's move along to the journey, but let's not labor it. Let's just get through the journey that Chad takes us on next in trying to debunk this. Agreed?
Sounds good.
Okay, and we're back from our brief cut. So we're going to go on the journey. So basically at this point, Chad shows you the footage, and then he's like, come with me on a journey as I try to debunk this. That is essentially what the documentary... Now, the funny thing is, the Sir No-Face footage is probably, literally 2 seconds?
Oh, yeah.
So this is an entire documentary, a 2-hour documentary based on 2 seconds of footage, which is incredible in itself. That's how remarkable the footage is. At the same time, the journey of footage was just a bit much. There's certain scenes... but I've criticized Chad enough in his editing in the previous 2 episodes. I'm going to just try to just stop that for this, go on the journey, and then tell you at the end what I think I saw. So, basically the first thing Chad does is, like, he looks at it, is like, I'm going to try to debunk this. So he first has to be like, I need to see if these people are lying. So he interviews the team to see if they're lying. That's basically step number 1. He sits down with each of the team members, asks them questions, really just to gauge their response. I don't think he doesn't trip any of them up. He doesn't get any of them caught in a lie. So their stories all stay together.
I mean, he's asking very honest questions.
Yeah. I would say that Chad would not have a profession as an interrogator, though.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah. Even just watching that, like, because sometimes he would just guide them to an answer. It's like, if you're trying to get them to stumble up, like, ask the question and let them answer rather than guiding them to a truth, something that you think sounds true anyways. But anyways, he interviews each of the team members, but of course then he spends the most amount of time on the team leader, Craig Powell. And now let's briefly talk about, because you brought this up earlier, Matt, and I'll let you recap this. The one weird thing right off the bat, that of all the nights that they're touring Cockatoo Island and researching it, the night that the most incredible footage in human history potentially occurs, Craig's not there. Craig and his wife, who are the 2 main members, are at home with their kid.
Wife is there.
Oh, his wife was there? Okay.
The wife is actually there, and that's part of my suspicion, is that at one point Chad says to them, she says, who would serve to benefit from this? Then she mentions all of the times where they couldn't buy the groceries they wanted to buy because, Craig needed to get a new camera. Or they couldn't do a dance class for the kids, or whatever the examples were. They had to make all these sacrifices as a family so that Craig could do something for the group. So first that place my mind goes is the wife serves to benefit from lying about this. And ironically, she's there. And as Fred said, on the one night that they're on Cockatoo Island, she is there and Craig is not. So all these sacrifices she makes for Craig, and she can't stay home that night with the kids. Craig has to stay home with the kids. And I found that part particularly odd.
I'm just going to throw this in there just to save our butts a little bit.
Oh. I didn't know we were butt saving. That's my fault.
Are you 100% sure that the wife was there?
100% sure.
You're 100.
110%.
Because I'm only like 20%. I thought she was at home with Craig. Why was Craig with home without the wife?
I see what I'm saying. I'm 100% sure she was there because he actually talks to her about that.
Okay. Because I thought there was two people. It wasn't just Craig. There wasn't. I thought the wife was at home with Craig.
Well, to be fair, Chad wasn't there.
I know, and the fact that stuff occurred without Chad present doesn't make sense. So, anyways, I'm saying that Craig and his wife weren't there. Matt's saying that the wife
was definitely there.
All right,
and I even remember he even said he sent her there because he trusted her to make sure that things were done correctly. Which, to be fair, is a very fair response to why she's there and he's not.
Okay, but at the end of the day, Craig wasn't there. Now, I can kind of get it. Like, they have kids, and maybe they've been going night after night. Does Craig need to be there every night? You know what I mean? Like, you're going ghost hunting. You're not really expecting something to happen right in front of you. You're going setting up cameras and coming back at the end of the night and getting them, and you'll look at them the next day. Is it really that big? Is it really that a big stretch to really care that maybe the team leader, like, on one particular night was like, "This is mine. I'm staying home tonight and watch my kids. You guys go set up the camera, see what you got."
Yeah, I definitely get that because they were there multiple nights. They weren't on Cockatoo Island one night.
Right.
They were on Cockatoo Island many nights.
And Craig was there on other nights that stuff happened, like the stuff with the lights. It's just on this night where this certain face is captured, he wasn't there, which is just odd.
It's a strange coincidence, no doubt. But the one thing that and Fred kind of hit it there. The one thing that is different about this night is all they were doing is setting up cameras.
Yeah, pretty
They
much.
were setting up cameras, camping out on the beach.
Yep.
Picking up the cameras and bringing them to Craig the next day.
Yeah, they basically showed up like midnight-ish and then left at like 6 a.m. when the boat came at 6 a.m. the next morning or something like that.
Or whatever, yeah. So, I mean, to be fair, maybe Craig doesn't need to be there, but it's still something that's
But it's one thing to address
Absolutely.
in a series of things to address. So, he interviews everybody. He interviews the team members and the wife. Nothing really worth mentioning. He doesn't catch them, trip them up, or anything like that. He interviews Craig. Now, he interviews Craig in a much different style. It's not a sit-down, I'm throwing questions at you. It's a much more casual interview. Like, they're literally strolling through a park. And he's not asking him questions. Chad's taking a different approach. I think he's just... I think they're just making a film, but it's a different approach at this point. They're just talking about, it's like, tell me about your background. What did you do for fun? How'd you grow up? Blah, 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 blah. Now, at one point...
So prior to all of this, when they were first courting Chad's team, if you will, if courting is the right word, they brought this the first time they were down in Australia, or second time, before they agreed to take on the documentary, they brought them down to a rugby match. And at one point, Craig said, "I played for this rugby team."
Well, that was also after the interview. The interview happened first. The interview happened first because he said one thing, and then when they were at the match, he said something different. So let me back up. During the interview, and then you can talk about what he said at the rugby match, but at the interview, while they're strolling through the park, Craig mentions that he was a fan of rugby. And then, basically, so Chad asked, like, did you play rugby? And Craig... I think it was an innocent answer. He said, I played on a high level, a high respectable level, and kind of leaves it at that. So then that jumps what Matt. Go ahead, Matt. Then later they go to a rugby match, and it's what Craig says that was odd.
Yeah, Craig had mentioned that he played for whatever team they were watching, whose name I can't remember.
It was like the English rugby team,
something or whatever. Australia, yeah. It was
Australia. My bad.
It was some New York Yankees of the rugby league in Australia.
Yeah.
And it really bothered Chad. That inconsistency really bothered Chad. That one time he's saying he played for this pro team, and the other time he's saying, I played at a high level, but I didn't go as high as I wanted to. And that bothered Chad.
Right.
Chad had to question the guy's honesty from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
In his mind.
Yeah. So this was a thing where Chad gets hung up on this, and he's like, well, there's an inconsistency. I've caught him telling a story that's inconsistent. And if he's capable of telling me inconsistent stories, I mean, how do I just blindly trust him and what he's telling me about this footage? What it ultimately turns out, fast forward to the end of the movie, Craig played for, basically was like a minor leaguer for this Australian rugby team, and at one point got called up to play, got called up from the minor leagues, but then got injured. So he was part of the organization, but never really got to play for them. So on the one hand, when they're strolling through the park, he's basically just saying, I played at a high, respectable level. But then the thing is, they show the footage like they were at the rugby match, and like it's almost like his testosterone was pumping Craig. He
Right.
was just so excited, and I think in just a braggadocious way, he's like, I played for these guys, because the excitement of being in that stadium and rugby is so huge. Everybody's so excited. I think then Craig kind of like didn't hold back at that point.
He wouldn't be the first guy to lie about the level of which he played
Yes.
the sport he loves. Okay, I mean, let's just say, call it what it is.
I played high school football in my left hand. On the right hand, I was legitimately the 6-string nose tackle, if you can imagine.
And by
5
6-string nose tackle,
tackles.
he meant that he actually bought a ticket to a few games and went to a couple.
Nose tackle. I was the Casey Hampton of the team. 6-string Casey Hampton. Look at me, I'm huge.
You are huge.
Anyways, so that was a thing, number one. Now, what was the other big thing? I always keep having trouble remembering. Oh, the CGI. Okay.
Yeah, that to me was
So-
huge.
And I actually didn't think this was a big deal at all. I thought I think both things Chad made a big deal of, but I think it was because he only found 2 things to make a big deal of, which also then goes and touches upon how interesting this footage was. So the one inconsistency was the rugby thing. The other thing was, when Chad looked at the footage, he basically thought really ultimately one of 3 possibilities. It's real, it's CGI, or it's a person. And I think it's just obvious to look at the footage and realize it's not a person. Obviously just looking at it. But number 2, they kind of did a reenactment where this entity comes out of from around the closet corner. That closet space is so small that you actually can't fit a person around the corner and be hidden from the camera. So it's like they didn't spend a lot of time going over that option because it just seemed pretty obvious it wasn't a person. So 3 options: real, a person, or CGI. Those are the 3 things that Chad puts on the table. He overlooks a glaring 4th one that we'll get into that a lot of people on the internet are mad that is like, if it's not real, this is probably the most obvious thing that it is, and it's never even mentioned in the film. I don't think it is that, so I'm okay with it. But anyways, we quickly just get through in the documentary that it's most likely not a person, which leaves real or CGI. So at this point, the rest of the documentary is focusing on CGI. Now, Craig Powell at one point, when Chad is basically asking him permission, can we make this into a documentary? Chad says, one of the things I'm going to look at is to see if you guys CGI this or if this is CGI.
And Chad said that one of my closest friends, his next-door neighbor, is one of the top CGI guys in all of Hollywood, who was like the head of the Transformers,
Benjamin Button,
and
so many other movies.
Avengers. And Fred and I did our due diligence on this and looked up the guy on IMDb.
And he is credited in all these movies.
He's legit. Whether or not his title translates to somebody who's the head of... I have no idea. I'm not in Hollywood. So... Craig's
this guy's at least credited with he is credited with CGI
on major films.
On major things like Avengers, Transformers.
I mean, the guy
stuff I'm forgetting, but
the guy I believe, if he didn't win, was nominated for an Oscar. The team he was on either won or was nominated for an Oscar. So the guy
knows his field.
The guy's legit, and so Craig's response was, "I would love to have somebody do that." Because I don't have anybody I can go to. I don't have anybody I can go to who knows CGI well enough.
And then Chad immediately has one, but then eventually two problems with Craig's response with that. The first one I think is kind of I think they're both kind of stupid. But again, I think Chad's just trying to find something to make it look like he did his due diligence to debunk it. I think both of these things, the rugby and the CGI thing, I think they're both just like I have to put something out there to make it look like I had my doubts. I think you could have had doubts on other things. I think these 2 things were like, oh, he said one thing about rugby and then at a later point another thing about rugby. It's like, it really wasn't that big of a discrepancy. Now, okay, so the thing back to the CGI. Craig basically says, Chad says, I have this expert who can look at it, who's a CGI expert. And Craig says, as Matt pointed out, great, I don't have anybody that could do that for me. So if you have an expert, that's awesome. Chad basically says